Good afternoon, everybody at Hume City Council who's managed to make it here to the session today. Thank you very much for your punctuality and your attendance. I really appreciate it. To anybody watching the recording later on, and if you're with family or friends, etc., good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, whatever time it is, and welcome to you too. I think this is the last session in our self-care bento box series, and this one is called Wrap Up, and that'll become fairly obvious in a couple of minutes. But you should by now all have received, well, you've all had your action plan, and hopefully you've been filling it in as we go. We've shared probably as many as 60 different tips and tricks and things you can do to sort of increase your self-care over the last 10 sessions or 11 sessions that we've had. And hopefully that you are sticking to some of them or all of them. I can't imagine everyone's done all 60. Good for you if you have. But the whole point of the exercise is that we are doing incremental things to just lift and up our self-care to a sort of a better level or a greater level for ourselves, to be better for ourselves, as well as, taking a radical approach to our self-care. So not just sleep, diet, and exercise, but looking at self-awareness, self-compassion, etc. And so we've been doing all of that. And what I want to do today is kind of wrap all of that up in it, and I use a metaphor in order to do that. So the wrap up is going to look like this. This is, let me get out of the way for just a second. This is what we call the sailboat metaphor. And I've emailed Nikki with a copy you can have for yourselves to sort of pin up somewhere, because I just find that it's a really useful way of just checking in on where we are at any given time or any given moment. It's a fabulous metaphor. And it was created, this metaphor, the sailboat metaphor is created by Hugo Alberts in about 2016. And he's a leading voice in that sort of positive psychology sort of school of thought, if you like. And in using the sailboat metaphor, what we do is we break down all of the sort of things that interfere or connect with or embellish our lives. And we just use them in a way that we can sort of picture it and look at it ourselves and look at where we are. So that's what we're going to use today. We're going to use the sailboat metaphor. And as I say, anyone who's just joined, if you can grab a piece of paper, I'm just going to give you some opportunity to self-reflect as we go through this sort of session. So based on that, and welcome to those who have just arrived, this is the very first one. What I'll do is I'll just disappear out of here for just a second. So the first element of the sailboat metaphor talks about water. And can whoever that is please mute themselves? That'd be great. Thank you. Water reflects, pardon the pun, what the water here does is it represents the sort of direct environment that we live in. It's an interact with and interacting. So the water in this metaphor is the environment that's characterized by many factors. The environment we live in it's our job, it's where we live, our geographical location, it's where we work. Can even represent our possessions if you're talking about your home, etc., and how you interact around there. So in sort of short, the water in this metaphor here is our direct physical reality. And so when you have a think about how you exist right now in your environment, I'm going to invite you to have a think about what are the things that will affect your sort of view of your environment right now. So what does the water look like for you? Is it choppy? Is it calm? And kind of keeping on that sort of metaphor, if you like. Is life kind of plain sailing for you right now, or do you think you need a life jacket? And what's the one thing I could do to sort of change for smoother sailing? So just have a think about that for a second. I'm just going to give you maybe a minute on that. Just have a think about that. What's my water like? Do we need a life jacket? Is it plain sailing or is it really choppy? Am I in stormy waters? And what could I do to head for safe harbor, as an example? What could I do for smoother sailing and to make life a little bit easier for myself? And if you want to make a note on that, you're very welcome to. The next part, the steering wheel. The steering wheel in this metaphor sort of represents your personal values, right? So in the same way that the steering wheel guides the direction of where the boat's going to go, our values guide how we're going to and how we want to live our lives. And you might have values which are very closely related, you know, to the conversation around boundaries, which I think was session 3 from memory. Values can be best compared to directions rather than destinations. So the things that are important to you, you might have values around honesty. You might have values around how much you work, values around how the kids behave. It could be your values around punctuality. It could be values around anything that guides your direction in how you sort of live your life, if you like. They're not destinations. Values are different. We're going to come to destinations in just a minute, but let me get out of the way here again. So your steering wheel on your sailboat, and remember the sailboat is kind of, the captain is you, the lighthouse would be the thing that sort of guides you and gives you sort of vision, etc. But the boat itself is kind of your own vessel and how you sort of interact with life. So the steering wheel is going to decide the direction that you're going in. So, and that's going to involve your purpose and your values and probably your passions as well. So the questions to ask yourself when you're thinking about this metaphor: am I living my best life? Am I going in the right direction? And what's getting in my way? What's stopping me from steering myself in the direction that I want to go? And you know, am I heading in the right direction? So just have a think about that for a couple of seconds. As I said, the steering wheel represents kind of, or decides where the boat will go. It's a direction rather than a destination. The destination comes next, and I'm going to move on to that now. So just like a boat can sail to certain destinations, wherever it's steered to, people can reach goals. So now there's, the direction is one thing, the destination is the other. And so while a value is a generalized sort of direction of your boat, a goal is a specific and concrete destination of the boat, if you like. So your destinations are your goals and your wishes and your aspirations. And it could be goals in your career. It could be goals in relationships. It could be goals in, I don't know, study. It could be goals in the sorts of things that you want to achieve in your career. And so the steering wheel will guide you towards it, but the destination is where you actually get to. And so the questions, I suppose, to ask yourself around this is, do you have an idea what your goals are? Because when we don't have a goal, then we're just kind of adrift, aren't we? We're not really sort of achieving anything. We're not going anywhere. We're not getting anywhere. And as a form of resilience and self-care, having goals is really, really important. Sharing goals with people is also equally important, particularly if they're going to support you in getting there. So the question to ask yourself around your destination or around your goals here is, do I have an idea of my goals? Am I specifically focused on one, or are they just kind of general in nature? Are they somebody else's goals, or are they really mine? Specific goals will support your self-confidence and your self-care. So having a goal and a destination is one thing, but I'd like to tap into what will it mean when you get there? What do you do when you get there, when you achieve your goal? Do you start new goals, or do you just go, okay, that's enough? What do you do if you don't achieve your goals? If they're too big or they're too sort of unachievable or something, your circumstance changes, your boat changes. What will you do? Can you change your direction? Can you change your goals? Hint, of course you can, and probably should on a regular basis anyway. Continually upgrading your sense of purpose and your sense of goals and what it is that you want to achieve. That's going to change all the time. So let's have a look at the things that are going to motivate and carry you towards your destinations and towards your sort of goals. Besides the steering wheel, of course. Leaks. What's draining your energy? What's preventing you from achieving either your destination or your goals? So in this metaphor, the leak in the boat represents weaknesses or challenges, factors that kind of hinder your valued living and achieving your goals. They'll usually reduce personal well-being. So have a think about that. It could be sleep, it could be diet, it could be exercise. What are the things that are holding you back? And they usually consist of patterns of behaving and thinking that negatively affect well-being, producing emotions like fear and anxiety and overwhelming stress. So yeah, what is it that's going on, or what are you doing, or what are you putting into your body that could be negatively affecting your personal well-being? What are the leaks in your boat? Now, there could be you, there could be other things. It could be partnerships, it could be relationships, it could be something else. Simon Sinek talks about focusing on the positive and not focusing on the negative. So like sometimes we'll focus solely on the leak in our boat, and that becomes all that we focus on and lock onto. And the leak is not the defining characteristic of us. It's just something that gets in the way. And you know, we'll talk about the other parts of the boat. We have sails for momentum, we have steering wheel for direction, etc. But sometimes we focus our attention only on this particular aspect, the leak in our boat. And if we can give it too much airtime. Simon Sinek, as I said, he talks about downhill skiers. And he said their focus is not on the trees that they could hit, but on the path that they want to follow. And downhill skiers, particularly competitive ones, don't look at the trees. They look at the path that they want to follow. I remember when I was learning to ride a motorbike, I was always told, look not where the bike is going, but where you want it to go. So you're turning a corner, look completely over your shoulder and look at where you're wanting the bike to get to, and the bike will go there. And I always thought that was a bit weird, but it makes perfect sense. And Simon Sinek is correct about this. Don't focus on the path, or sorry, don't focus on the trees, focus on the path. It's a bit like this idea of we can't focus on something. How did he put it? He said, don't think of an elephant. No, of course, we're all thinking about elephants, right? So, and so we can't tell ourselves to not focus on something. So whatever we put our attention to, that's kind of what we're going to achieve. So what's the leak in your boat? And let me get out of your way while I give you time to think about that again for a second. What are the leaks? What are the things holding me back? And do I only think of them? Can I fix the leak? And in the same way that the absence of problems don't automatically imply that we've got well-being. So good health is more than the absence of illness. And in the same way, health is not the opposite of ill. You know, there's more involved than that. So using that analogy, have a think about the leaks. What are the things that are slowing you down? What are the things that could be holding you back? And you might find that the sails on your boat, you know, you're away for a second, the sails on your boat, which are the things that represent the strength and your resources and everything that you use for sort of to cope effectively. These are the factors that facilitate valued living and goal achievement, and they increase personal well-being. They motivate us and they carry us along. These are the sails on your boat. And they're usually positive traits like thoughts and feelings and behaviors. And examples of strength are like effective, good coping styles, but they kind of activate and provide energy and enthusiasm. So what are the things you're doing for your well-being that support you? Let's not think about the leaks for a second, because it's very likely that the sails you have, the things that carry you along, are stronger than the things that are holding you back. And I believe that to be the case on a long-term, permanent basis. Maybe more, you know, we have leaky boats sometimes that hold us back, but it's a temporary thing. Let's think about our sails, and let's think about the path, not the trees. So I'm going to give you a second to have a think about, what are my sails? What are my strengths and resources? What carries me along? Could be friends, it could be family. You know, I'm a fan of playtime. Hobbies, optimisms, the things that give me sort of positive strength. And can I rely on my sails to pull my leaky boat without having to fix the leak? You might find that you've got enough in there. And it can be hard actually sometimes to think about what are our positive traits. It's like sort of somebody asking you, what's the best thing about yourself? What do you like about yourself most? And, you know, it can be a difficult one to answer. It can make us a little bit uncomfortable. But there will be things that you have in your arsenal or on your boat that will be sails that carry you along. And it's important to, you know, offer some gratitude for them, be grateful that they exist. So now we've been speaking all about internal stuff, and we're coming up to the last thing that sort of lives within us, if you like, before we focus on external factors in this metaphor. But the last one I want to talk to you about that's internal is our compass. And let me just get down out of the way here for a second. As you can see, a compass is something that's internal. Now, the important thing about a compass is we think it's for giving us direction and pointing us in a certain way, but a compass can also tell us where we're at and where we currently are now. And people sometimes miss that when we're talking about compasses in the context of a metaphor like this. So a compass is for navigation and orientation, right? It shows direction relative to the environment and relative to where we are now. So not just where we're going, but where we are as well. Provides feedback on our destination, I guess. And it's a valuable sort of guide, if you like, on where we're going. A compass can also give us internal feedback. So, you know, feelings like and emotions, are they positive like joy and energy? Or are they negative like fear and anxiety? That will inform us that some attention is required. So your compass is your internal feedback. Your emotional well-being. Remember, we spoke about emotions. We dedicated more than one session in our bento box series to emotional recognition and emotional regulation. So for a couple of moments, have a think about what your emotional awareness looks like. What's my compass telling me? Am I heading in the right direction? Am I okay where I am? What's my emotional awareness like? Am I good at recognizing emotions? Here's the other thing about emotions. Sometimes people say to me, God, you focus on emotions a lot. I do. And I do because what we often don't realize is that our emotions are present every minute of every day. I used to say every waking hour, but in actual fact, we have emotional responses when we're asleep as well. nightmares, right? Vivid dreams can stir up emotions. And as we've said before, when we're talking about emotions, we're talking about feelings. We're talking, and that can sometimes make people uncomfortable, but they're ever present, and they're never right or wrong. They just are. They are signals for what's happening for us. So in terms of our compass here, and our internal feedback, it's going to be very, very important that we recognize our feelings and emotions. And I'll say, I don't know if I've said this to you before, but behind or underneath every action and every behavior sits a sort of a feeling, an emotion, an urge, whatever it is, that motivates the behavior. And underneath every emotion or feeling sits a need or a desire or a yearning for something. So that need creates the emotion that creates the action. And much of that happens outside of our thinking process, outside of our sort of personal awareness. So being able to recognize when we're feeling something in the body, something isn't quite right, or I'm feeling really relaxed and comfortable, this is lovely. And you don't have to figure out how or why. You don't have to work it all out in the head. But in terms of guiding where you are and guiding where you want to be, having that sort of emotional wisdom, if you like, is hugely important. It's really important for us to be able to, I think, just to be able to function at the best version of ourselves that we can be. And it's a radical part of self-care that doesn't often get spoken about, but we've been talking about it here for the last few months, which is I think, a good thing. So where are we? We are now finished with the internal motivators and the internal constructs of our sailboat metaphor. So we are the captain still, and we are in our sailboat, you know. So just quickly recapping, the water is the environment we're in. Steering wheel decides what direction we're going in to the destinations, which are our goals and our wishes and our passions and purpose, etc. There are things that get in our way, things, little leaks in our boat, but we also have things that carry us well in our direction, like the sails. And I, you know, generally the sails need to be bigger than the leaks. Sometimes they're not, and when they're not, we just head for safe harbor. But the compass decides not only where we're going, but where we're at. So these are all internal processes. And I want to talk now a little bit about the stuff that happens in our day that we don't have any control over. So the weather can be sort of compared to uncontrollable circumstances in our life. So just like we can't control the weather, Donna and I were talking about this earlier, there are sort of positive and negative events that will take place that we cannot control. That's life. And I'm often asked by people, you know, particularly when they're struggling with some anxiety or something, what do I do about this? And, you know, I often say, okay, let's make a list of everything that's affecting us in a particular situation, something that's causing us angst or whatever. So we have a big long list. Now let's draw a line through everything that we cannot control. You'll find that the list actually shrinks to probably a quarter of the size that it originally was. Now let's focus on the things that we can change. And then these are the things that we can have an influence over, or we can directly change. And you'll find that the list gets smaller and smaller. So it's the same thing with the weather in our metaphor. We can't control it. We can't change it. We got to work with it and work around it, if you like. So have a think about, what are the uncontrollable circumstances in your life? What's the weather like right now? And it's related to the water conversation earlier. So is it plain sailing for me, or do I need to find some shelter? Maybe think about resilience. That was session 6 in our bento box series, and you can go back and have a look. We did an exercise around our resilience. You can head back and have a look at that. And thinking about resilience in our uncontrollable circumstances, finding opportunity in adverse weather. Some sailors will sort of hoist the sails and ride out, you know, in front of a storm because of the sort of pace that they get. Others will head for calm harbor. But it's stuff that you can't control in your life. And what's that like, and how can you control it, or how can you deal with it? And how can you control the outcomes, if you like? And then finally, the last element in this sailboat sort of metaphor, as you like, other boats. Now, this is an interesting one. The other boats in the sea kind of represent the people that surround us. They can influence us in many ways, positively and negatively. So have a think about, you know, if in a business perspective, you'd talk about the competition and the things that can sort of be an opportunity or a threat to us, if you like. But other people and peers and people we work with or family members are other boats in our environment and in our way sometimes. So let's have a think about your interaction with other boats sailing on the water in the same area as you. And the other interesting thing I'll say about the other boats and other people and peers that can influence our environment, there are interactions between all of these elements that we've been speaking about. The different components of the boat metaphor, these don't exist in isolation. They're interacting with each other continuously. So a boat that sails in a personally valuable direction, so that steering wheel, you know, element number 2, will be more likely to stay on track during stormy weather compared to a boat that's sailing in a direction that's not perceived as personally sort of meaningful. So in other words, valued living can enhance your resilience. So there's just, and you'll be receiving a copy of this metaphor on email for you to sort of stick on your fridge or wherever you want to put it, and just have a think about the different elements in that boat metaphor for yourself. Have a think about what other interactions you can think of. Think about taking actions when sailing in bad weather or poor weather or bad waters or whatever. Look for balance between the elements of direction and destination. And then don't ignore any of those elements. So there are a lot of boats in the water, and it can get very, very crowded, and some can get lost in the noise. So I'd invite you to just think about where you are in your boat and where other people are in their boats. And sometimes colleagues might need safe harbor, and they might need rescuing at sea. And have a think about how you can actually support people in that sort of space as well. I'm going to stop the recording now, and we can have a bit of a chat about what you think of the metaphor. So if you've been watching the recording, thank you very much, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And I'm going to have a chat with my friends that are still here.